Hello, this is Simon from Film Stories. Thank you so much for listening to this Film Stories Podcast Network podcast. And thank you too to the lovely folks at Prop Store who have sponsored it. Prop Store is a place where you can bid on memorabilia from the movies, and Prop Store also has a live auction taking place from September the 4th to the 6th, 2025 in Los Angeles, California. Now, don't know about you folks, I'm not in Los Angeles, California, so I'm instead I've already registered and I've been looking at the entire catalogue, which you can find at propstore.com. And boy, have I found some stuff to waste my pocket money on. Right, sit back for this. As well as stuff from Aliens, from Blade Runner, from Star Wars, all the classy stuff that I'm supposed to want. The thing I most want from this auction is a life-size, cable-controlled animatronic Emperor Penguin from Batman Returns. Do you remember 1992's Batman Returns and how ropey the penguins looked at the end? Well, I want one of those in my office. I'm also quite taken by Walter White's white Y-fronts from Breaking Bad, as worn by Bryan Cranston. The elastic looks a little bit saggy on them, but, you know, needs must. This is memorabilia. You can find the entire auction catalogue at propstore.com, and that auction takes place September the 4th to the 6th. 2025.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 40% off site-wide, plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. That's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast is given away by its title, though. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about production stories, marketing stories, release stories, distribution stories. All those ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, films manage to get made. Film Stories is also a very proud part of the Film Stories Podcast Network, a network of, over 50 shows now, covering various bits of films, TV and gaming. If you just do a search for Film Stories Podcast Network, hopefully you'll find another show that you like to delight your eardrums. Hopefully this one delights your eardrums as well. Because what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest release and or their body of work. And you get a bit of both here, because I'm delighted to welcome back around 7-8 months after his last appearance, Chris Columbus, writer, director, producer. And I spoke to him a month or two ago before this was being released, at the point where he'd locked down his final cut of his new film, The Thursday Murder Club, which he's directed and is on Netflix at the point this is being released. We also talk about a few other things. His production company Maiden Voyage comes up, the film 9 Months that he directed. Of course, he directed the first 2 Harry Potter films as well. Maiden Voyage, couple of films just appear. I think the film Didi we talk about. I bring up Patti Cakes as well. But everything else I think is pretty much self-explanatory in the audio that you're about to hear. I'm going to set it all up with a clip from the trailer of the Thursday Murder Club. You'll be able to hear my conversation with Chris Columbus, the other side of this.
There she is. Joyce, are you a nurse? Bang on target. I'm Elizabeth. Would you take a look at that for me, please?
Dear God.
'Tis a lot of blood. Would you care to join us to discuss things further?
Who is us?
I'm sorry, how rude of me. We're the Thursday Murder Club. We investigate cold cases. It's a club about murder. Does sound a bit bonkers.
In breaking news,
There's been a murder. An actual murder.
The victim appears to have been bludgeoned to death.
Now we've got a real case to solve, isn't it wonderful? Obviously, R.I.P. and all that.
And how do we catch them?
What we need is a man or a woman on the inside.
Would you like to be investigating the murder?
who do you think you are, the head of MI5?
We better get started.
Yes, intermediate knitting starts here in 1 hour.
Oh, where do we find you?
You
You're in
find
front of
me
a Beatles poster.
Yes, my favorite film of all time. In my office,
right?
my office in San Francisco.
Okay, I'm curious. What are the movie posters? If you turn the camera around, is it just A Hard Day's Night? It's
No, you will find Hard Day's Night. My other
oh, what a film! Yeah,
Some Like It Hot. My wedding photo, which you don't really want to see.
well, if you
The
took a video of it, that's
all the proofs, the contact sheet of the Springsteen Born to Run album cover.
is that right?
This one being the one used for the album.
Yeah,
And then another
Of
film
course.
that's inspired me, Young Frankenstein, and lobby cards from Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers.
Oh, amazing!
And then Robin and I on a motorcycle shoot for Mrs. Doubtfire, 16 millimeter projector, which will.
Does it work?
Oh yeah, I have
Yeah.
a lot of prints, most of which I've since donated to the UCLA Film Archives.
Yeah.
Because I screen them here, and I'm at this point I'm the only one who wants to watch 16 millimeter prints. Another lobby card from the Marx Brothers,
Yeah.
and this was given to me by David Heyman when
I-
we wrapped Potter. This is each of the Beatles running into a train station, taken by the photographer on the set of A Hard Day's Night. And unfortunately, this is faded, so this is frustrating to me. But anyway, there you go. Little tour behind the San Francisco office.
I mean, it's interesting touch eye. I mean, I've always been fascinated by your touch points. I remember you talking donkeys ago when you were doing Home Alone about David Lean was an influence on the way
Yes,
you
which
on
is
the way you
it-
shot that film.
Yeah, and at the time it seemed odd to talk about it, although it really wasn't. And I didn't know when I became obsessed with really the first act of Great Expectations that it would
Yeah.
actually influence how I would approach Home Alone, but it really did, And now I look at the film, I tend not to watch my old films, but Home Alone is one that I've had to introduce, and every holiday season symphonies seem to want to, play a live accompaniment with the orchestra. And yeah, definitely see the influence there.
I'm always conscious whenever I interview you not to talk about Home Alone, really, because I just think everybody talks about Home Alone. But I am kind of curious about like looking at it through your own eyes when you shot it. When you shot a film like that, effectively you talked about David Lean through the eyes of a child. I think that kind of perspective on it. What happens when you look back at your own work?
Well, there's like I think with most directors, there's some directors who are a little more blessed who have maybe 7 or 8 films that they can, I probably there's a good 5, 6 films that I'm really proud of, and then I have issues with the others, but that's to be expected.
Yeah.
When I look back at something like Home Alone, the influences are because the influences never really connect with the actual finished film, to most people. But if you
Yeah.
get into weeds and you start to discuss it, it becomes sort of obvious,
Well, that's the same with any filmmaking, though, isn't it? I'd imagine, because I've been reading. I collect loads of old film magazines, so I've been reading an old interview when 9 Months came out.
Right.
And they devoted a good chunk of it to the amount of time you spent into getting Hugh Grant's hair right. And I think
By
you
the way, I
described.
still never got it right. I hadn't seen the film. I had not seen the film since I hadn't screened
You
the film.
screened it, didn't you, a few weeks ago, I think?
Yeah, I screened it in San Francisco because they were giving me some sort of as you get up in age, they start to give you these honors if you survive. I guess
Yeah.
these awards are really for survival, I think, more than anything else, and the fact that they're still hiring you to direct. So, um, yeah, so we screened 9 months, and I saw it with an audience for the first time because it was one of those films that one of the two or three films that I've done that I felt was unfairly maligned at the
Yes.
time. Others deservedly were maligned at the time, but that one particularly, I just felt when it was screened. I remember us screening the film after we had screened Mrs. Doubtfire because it was really on the tail of Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
Just took the same crew, the same San Francisco crew, most of the same people who worked on Doubtfire did 9 months. So it did have a connection to Doubtfire in a stylistically as well. But anyway, screening it for an audience, seeing that they responded to it the same way was really rewarding. It was only 450, 500 people, but at the same time to see them all, to see that film with a collection of people all laughing at the same jokes and seeing that 90% of the jokes still play today was rewarding. And ironically, nobody talks about it because the film's very difficult to find on streaming. Very
Yes.
difficult to
Yeah.
find. But Robin's performance in the film, which is a supporting performance, is equally every bit as good as everything he did in Mrs. Doubtfire. So seeing it again, it brought tears to my eyes, but tears of laughter because I had not seen that performance with an audience since 1995, I guess, when the film was released.
Well,
But
I was
anyway, Hugh Grant, back to Hugh Grant's hair. Yeah, Hugh Grant's hair was a disaster in that. That's the only thing that's a real disaster in the film. I don't know what they did on because we hired him right after Four Weddings.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they did, but whatever they did on Four Weddings was right. Whatever we did for the most of the time was wrong. Hugh over the years has complained about his performance in that film, and he's absolutely wrong. There are a couple of
Yeah.
places where he's a little over the top, but by saying that, I mean places, moments. So I haven't spoken to Hugh since it all went down, but I'd love for him to reevaluate what we did on that film, because I think it's quite good.
Well, it's a great big huge old article in Premiere there, which I've been digging through. And last time I spoke to you, you were in London for Nosferatu. And it's one of the few because we got into Only the Lonely a lot, which
Yes.
and Maureen O'Hara and just like the
Right.
joy of that. But the thing that was sort of lost with 9 months, you almost seemed quite sad about it when we talked about it. We never really got to it, and I was just conscious all the same level of detail went into it, all the hard work went into it, and then the narrative is sort of taken out of your control a little bit.
Yes.
Was that the heart of the sadness of it? Am I reading that wrong?
Part of the sadness of it was, yeah, at the time, certainly at the time. Interestingly enough, at the time, Hugh he did a brilliant thing by appearing on Jay Leno's chat show,
Yes, I
and
remember that.
really within moments turning his career around. He did something very brave and extraordinary when you see what's going on, particularly in America today, where
Yeah,
people are honest about what happened. He just was completely honest, completely transparent about
yeah,
what happened. And as a result, people accepted him. And it was, for the most part, within a year, it was all forgotten about, within maybe 2 years. Unfortunately, at the time, it put a bit of a stain on the film, and I don't think. I mean, we did okay at the box office, but I really think we would have done a lot better box office wise had that not happened. But when I screened the film again, it was nice to have some sort of historical bookend. When I screened it in San Francisco, we did a Q&A afterwards. No one asked about it. A lot of the people who were in the
yeah,
audience were in their 30s, 20s. They didn't even know about it.
yeah.
To them, it was interesting to see the wizard from Wicked, suddenly as a younger man. It was interesting. I think Jeff Goldblum was sort of the biggest star at that particular time when we screened it a month ago.
I still remember the 99% effective, 1% totally bloody ineffective I
Exactly.
haven't seen
Yes.
it for a
Yes.
while either, but that's always kind of stuck in my head. My one other matters arising from our last conversation, that I think we had last December, was you told me then, it came up in a couple of interviews, that one of the core influences on the way you shot the Thursday Murder Club was Robert Eggers. And in particular, a crane shot that you would never have used on an interior with two actors that you decided to use in the Thursday Murder Club because you'd seen him do something in Nosferatu that just like was breaking the rules of how you would assume to do it. When you've come to direct this, I mean, you've talked about how you were sort of like a change director after going through Nosferatu, after working with Robert for a little bit. What were the things you're doing differently that you wouldn't have done before?
Well, the scene that you're talking about was a scene that unfortunately was cut
I
heavily, but
looked for it and I couldn't see it. I thought,
it's there. It's sort of the scene now begins in the middle of the scene.
right.
I don't want to talk about the beginning of the scene because the beginning of the scene will actually be utilized in the, if we're lucky enough, and all signs seem to point in that direction that we will be shooting a sequel or the next, I guess, the next chapter. I don't want to
Yeah.
call it a sequel in the Thursday Murder Club. That scene will actually, it was such a good scene that we will actually put it in the second movie. But in this film, the scene picks up in the middle of the scene where Pierce Brosnan's character and Ben Kingsley's character, Ron and Ibrahim, are looking at a board of suspects in Ibrahim's apartment. It's really the
Right.
only time, one of the only two times in the film you see Ibrahim's apartment. And Ibrahim's apartment, although looking very grand, was very. And then they actually go and sit on the sofa, and Ron gets a call that his son has been put in jail for the murder of
Okay.
Tony
Okay.
Grant. Um, so that scene really did not need a crane. But I had liked what I saw, what Rob was doing with the crane in interior scenes in Nosferatu, and I utilized it in that scene, and I utilized it in a hospice scene uh, at the
Yeah.
end of the film as well. And I started utilizing the crane quite a bit in a lot of interior scenes. Um, and in the past, I wouldn't have done that. I was strictly, in my filmmaking vocabulary, I was sort of strictly under the belief that you only really used a crane outdoors when you were doing bigger, grander shots. So that ability sort of to use a crane in more intimate situations, I think improved at least the camera moves that happened on the film. And that again, these we're talking about very small details that
Yeah.
most people wouldn't notice, but um, in the whole of the film, it really works to give it a certain elegance, and that's the only way I can sort of explain what Rob did on Nosferatu. It's not the lighting as much. It's not obviously it's not the subject matter, but it is the sense of elegance that permeates the frames in Nosferatu that I wanted to bring to Thursday Murder Club. The two pictures have nothing in common um, thematically, but stylistically, there are some things that I took from Nosferatu.
For you as a human being, though, is that quite energizing? That your toolkit is evolving with each film. That no matter how many films you've made, you're finding new ways to make them.
I definitely think it's energizing. I also think that it's again, maybe we talked about it, but I feel that, and because I've been doing this for almost maybe, well, I've been writing certainly for 40 years, but
Yeah.
because I've been doing this for so long, it's interesting for me to see directors of my age or directors who are even a little bit older sort of actually set in their ways,
Yes.
not not really learning from younger directors. And that to me is the biggest the biggest fault you can sort of have as a director is working with someone younger and saying and giving them advice to the point where you're not listening to them.
Yeah.
There obviously is a lot of advice I can offer to younger directors because I've been doing it for 40 years. But at the same time, there's a lot of things I can take away from their sort of fresh, their fresh approach
Yeah.
in terms directing and shooting, and I think that refreshes me every time I go into making a film. So watching a director work or seeing how they work really influences my whole philosophy about jumping into a film. And it's been with Maiden Voyage particularly, it's been very positive in terms of working with all of these directors and seeing how each of them approach a scene.
Well, you're up to 15 films now, I think, with Maiden Voyage. I always have to, I think it's 15. I always have to name check Patty Cakes when I'm talking to you because I just, that film cannot be name checked enough. But as I understand it, one of your key tenets with Maiden Voyage is if a director requires something and asks for something, partly as a result of an experience I think you had on one of the Potter films, you will go out of your way to make sure that they get the tool that they need. How do you sort of identify which tools you need? How do you know? It's almost like a weird, like wrapping myself in knots question, but how do you sort of know what you don't know?
You know what you don't, you can only know what you don't know when you're in the middle of experiencing it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I can only say that when you reach a an impasse on a scene, or you're in the middle of shooting something and you realize it's not working, you need to be able to get out of it. It's painting yourself into a corner and then finding a way to exit the room without walking across the freshly painted floor. And as a result of that, it's some things I've learned from other directors, but some things I've learned from working, just working on films with actors.
yeah,
And the key is really the key in all of this over the years is navigating actors, because there's the one thing you are not going to convince me as a director who's been working for years, is that you can actually direct a film coming from the world of gaming or coming from the world of animation. And
yeah,
look, I'm going to be proven wrong by saying that. And a lot of successful films have been made by first-time animators.
yeah,
But animators and gamers, for lack of a better word, aren't really connecting with actors. And the key to failing as a director, at least in the long term, you may have a couple of successes, but there's no longevity if you don't know how to connect with actors. If you actually haven't put yourself in their situation and understood what it means to be on screen, to be actually performing.
yeah.
And if you have a fear of talking to actors, your career is over. It may not, as I said, it may not be over in the first year, but I don't think you will be able, it takes a good 40 years to be able to stand in a room with Helen Mirren and Sir Ben Kingsley and
I
Pierce
was
Brosnan
writing it down.
and
Two Oscar winners in there. Yeah,
Celia
yeah.
Imrie. You've got the Mount Rushmore
Well,
of
you've got a
voice
Doctor
acting.
Who. You've got
Yeah, and aside from that history, you want to be able to connect with them on an artistic level, not on not thinking about what they've done. And you don't want to be walking onto your film set thinking about all the work that they've done in the past. You can only
yeah.
be thinking about what you have to handle now.
If I've got this right, though, when you came aboard this film, I mean, casting was already underway and the train was already moving to some degree. I'm just because I think we got I mean, in the trades it came up April 2024, the official announcement. I would imagine you'd been on board for a little bit before that. But at the point you jump aboard, what position was it in? How much needed to be done to get to day one of shooting?
Oh God, it was in terrible shape. I mean, the script was, and by terrible shape, I mean it didn't bear a strong resemblance to Richard's book.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, the previous writers felt that they had to, another mistake that I've made, and I think can also hurt certainly an audience's appreciation of the film. The writers felt that they needed to deviate from Richard Osman's plot, and in a big way. Uh,
Okay.
they felt that they had to reinvent the first book. And when I came on board, I didn't feel that that was necessary. I felt that there was a reason that, in the same way, I mean, look, it's the same way I approached Harry Potter. there is a reason that these books are so beloved by so many people. Um, there's no reason to, for lack of a better word, to fuck with them. There you need to literally be faithful, but at the same time realize you're making a film. So the faithfulness applies to the plot and the characters and somewhat the structure, although Richard's book is if we translated the entire book into a film, it would have been a 4.5, 5 hour film. So we had
Yeah,
to find a way to sort of condense what exists. But at the same time, I was committed to being extraordinarily faithful to what he had written. And, that meant a lot of meetings with Richard, getting to know him as a person, getting to understand where the series was going. Same way the same sort of intense connection I
yeah,
made all those years ago with J.K. Rowling. So, for me, that was the key, coming on board and finding a writer. And we found Katie Brand, who
of course,
came
yeah.
in and also understood the material from a British perspective. Um, as desperately as I want to be British and as desperately as I love the
You've tried
UK,
really hard over the years as well.
look, I've got a Hard Day's Night poster hanging above my head,
Duly
reminding
noted.
me, what I love about the UK and about UK cinema. I still need a sort of a British voice to come in and translate the material
Yeah,
and turn the book into a script that we could actually shoot and that would appeal that would attract actors. So no, none of those people were cast. Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Celia Ben,
yeah,
none of them were in the film until Katie had written a script that we could send to them that I was proud of. So everyone committed to that film based on Katie's script.
yeah,
And Katie really, was able to translate Richard's voice onto the page and really attract this level of cast.
yeah. I mean, I
So
really,
anyway, so none of it was done. I didn't walk into a situation where anything was cast or any. We had a script that didn't work. We didn't have a green light on the film. We had to I had to work with Katie to make sure that we had something that would appeal, first of all, to the actors and convince the studio to green light the film.
well, I'm going to take I'm going to drum beat just for a second. I'm the one person who put Naomi Aki on a film magazine front cover as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
She
One
deserves
of the
it.
best young actors working today, Naomi
I
Aki.
felt, when she does not get, certainly at this point, does not get enough credit
I
for how
agree.
great she is. And I thought it was real. I really thank Carmel Cochrane, our casting director, for putting me in touch with Naomi and
Yeah,
Naomi being, Naomi, no, Naomi willing to do the film. And at that point, I hadn't seen anything that she had done.
yeah.
So we just met and just meeting with her and talking. She didn't even need to read for the film. I just had a sense that she could play this character.
That's
By the
interesting.
way, Naomi has the ability, she's not the right age, certainly, but she could play any of these characters. She's that good of an actor. And when you see her in this film, you'll realize how different it is from the work she's done previous to
Of
this film.
course, yeah, yeah. Because I first came across her with The Score, which was an independent film I don't think many people saw at all. And
Right.
straight away, she was holding her own in an ensemble of what I would perceive to be more experienced performers.
Yes.
And reflecting on 30 Murder Club, it's just like the most thankless role potentially in that is hers. She
Yes.
just because like the gravitas. You talk about being on a set and working with actors and not being intimidated by actors, but presumably also you've got less experience is the wrong word, but certainly younger actors. You have to make sure also aren't intimidated by the circumstance of the set.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about when you work with someone like Naomi or someone like Danny Mays,
Yeah,
whose work I wasn't familiar with until I had seen him until I saw him in Guys and Dolls and realized
interesting.
what an extraordinary actor he was. Um, you realize that those actors like Naomi and Danny, and to a certain extent David Tennant, although David Tennant has had a lot more experience,
Yeah,
these are actors that can really, you realize, are not only professional enough, but strong enough to be able to hold their own in scenes with people like Helen Mirren and Sir Ben Kingsley. So I sense that confidence in a different way from each one of them before we even started shooting the film.
It's interesting seeing the Amblin logo again on the front of one of your films as well. I know I'm all for like really pivotal moments in people's film stories. And I was it 5th of March 1982. You were due to meet Spielberg, and the day John Belushi died. And I'm just wondering, if fate had taken a different turn just in those couple of weeks around then, would we even be sat here? It's always little things like that always play on my mind a little bit.
Well, I know, Paul, there was a point in my career when I was going to do the third film. It is, it's a curse and a blessing to be so obsessed with film history. But there was a
Love it.
point when I was desperate to do the third film of the Robert Redford, Paul Newman teaming. It was
Really?
Cassidy and the Sting. And then I was set to do a book called A Walk in the Woods. And that's an entirely long story in and of itself. But I met with Redford on several occasions. I worked on the script. And then I met with Newman. We spent 6 hours together in Connecticut, which was a dream come true.
Yeah.
And then Paul got sick pretty close,
Yeah.
probably 4 weeks after I met with him, and passed away shortly thereafter. So I had no interest in doing the film after that. To me, that was the joy of seeing those two on screen together one last time. But Paul said to me in that meeting, which he said in subsequent interviews, part of and he called me kid a lot, which I particularly find funny. He said, part of this business is talent, 50% talent, 50% luck. And that's certainly the way I looked at my relationship with Steven Spielberg, because Steve, it's not really as much about that meeting. It's Steven, that it's about the Gremlin script being
Yeah.
sent to over 50 producers and studios, and everyone passing on it, and no one who knows who read it. But Steven, in terms of luck, passing his assistant's desk on his way out, on his way to go home on a Friday evening, and seeing, thankfully, Gremlins was sitting on top of the pile of her scripts. Thankfully, Steven stopped, talked to her, and saw the title and was intrigued by the title. Thankfully, picked up the script and took it home for the weekend and read it. And that's when then the following week, I got a call in New York from Steven about the script. So that was pure luck.
Yeah.
Pure, the talent side of it, which I guess is 20%, 30% of it, is the fact that the script worked for him and he liked the script. So that moment, that Friday evening that he was leaving his office, cemented our relationship much more than the fact that, it was bad luck and tragedy that, affected our
Yeah.
March 5th meeting, that no one could have predicted that. And the meeting was reset for a few weeks later. So I really do believe that was a stroke of real, luck, divine intervention, if you want to call it that. And Stephen and I we partnered again temporarily on the film The Help.
Yeah.
That was I think that was a DreamWorks film.
Yeah.
And then Amblin again. It's very emotional for me when I was mixing the film, because we don't preview the film or see the film when we're working on it with the logos. The logos come toward the end. So when I was doing the sound mixing on the film and I'm looking at the final mix, there it is, the Amblin logo in front of the first film that I've directed for Amblin. So that was very emotional, because I always knew when I was working with Steven that I wanted to be a director. And this is sort of full circle that I was finally able to direct a film with the Amblin logo. And Stephen and I are working on a couple of projects, and I was in his offices a few weeks ago, and we're talking about Murder Club and looking around the offices, the same offices that I was a writer in 40 years ago.
Oh, interesting.
He's still in the same office. My office was 3 doors down. Someone else is in there now, but it's Still the same geography, the same movie posters, uh, the same games in the gaming room. So I really felt this kinship about being back. And I feel people so many times are like, what is the secret of the Amblin, those Amblin movies of the 80s? And I can't explain it. I can't
Yeah.
define it. But I know that the secret exists when Stephen and I are sitting in those offices together. There is that feeling of the 80s comes back. I can't explain it. It's like going back to your favorite museum or favorite cinema that you saw your first film in or favorite restaurant. When I'm sitting there with Stephen in the Amblin offices, that sense of excitement and that feeling starts in those rooms and permeates, and it's in the theaters. So when I see an Amblin film in the theater, I don't know if anyone else feels the same way,
Yeah.
but when I see that logo, it
Yeah.
takes me
Yeah.
back to those days.
I'm just a boring film nerd who sits like in the middle of the UK, and I always thought the secret of Amblin was stakes. That the stakes were at heart so small and so relatable that I appreciating there's a bunch of other factors, but the Goonies, the great example about ultimately they're just trying to save their house. And it's
Right.
just like I can completely get on that. And I talk about this quite a lot. The closest I've seen to that outside of Amblin in like the last 10, 15 years was the Captain Underpants animated film, where the
Right.
stakes were so small, it's just the fear of two people being separated in class
Right.
while the world was under threat. But actually, the film's focus was that's a skill I've not got, and I always admire it enormously in Gremlins, in the Goonies, in things like that. It's just how small the stakes are in the middle of something big. That's just my two penneth on it. Are you conscious? My question, I guess, in the midst of all of this, and why I wanted to bring it up, are you conscious then, certainly with Maiden Voyage, that people are looking to you for the same kind of breaks that you once looked to people like Steven Spielberg for, that people are looking to you for that same stroke of luck? And has that, and also being frozen out on the set of Reckless, been paramount to you in what appears to be an insistence on holding the ladder of opportunity for others?
Um, I certainly don't look at, there's part of Main Voyage, a small part that, and Robert Eggers is the perfect example, that can potentially be a stepping stone to bigger
Yeah,
films. And I think Robert is the sort of the poster child for starting with a very small film like The Witch and graduating into a $60 million version of
yeah.
Nosferatu, which is not it's not an independent film. It's a big studio picture. That's the best way to describe Nosferatu.
But also
So
something like Didi shouldn't exist really by current like the current way the movies work. It shouldn't
no,
exist.
no, and there is that sense that we want to breathe life into the types of movies, for the most part, that aren't being made by big studios. That's
Yeah,
where we start, and that's always where we start. If each director goes on to bigger and better things, that's fantastic. But for, that's never part of the grand plan of Maiden Voyage. The grand plan of Maiden Voyage is one director, one film, getting that film made. So that's what was so important about Didi, is getting that film made, getting Sean's vision
yeah,
made. That was important about Tallulah, was getting Sean Hayter's version of that film made. And there's a perfect example of someone who not only went on to bigger and better things, but and ends up directing a film that and wins the Academy Award for Best Picture.
yeah,
None of that could have been planned. It's just a matter of preserving at this time. I think the best thing anyone can do for a filmmaker is preserving their vision and letting them make their first film. As no one can, you're never going to make a film exactly as you see it in your mind before you start shooting, but getting their vision as close to possible as of their getting that filmmaker's vision as close to possible to their original vision, so that they are so that their film reflects who they are as a filmmaker. And as a result of that, I think the films are good. That's why the films, for the most part, I have to say, actually, I can't think of a maiden voyage film we've been involved with to this point, knock on wood, that I haven't been extraordinarily proud of. I just think every
Love that.
filmmaker has found their voice, and they all are pretty great films, whether they're documentaries or whether they're narrative films, you
But
know.
even going back to the grants you were doing at New York University, I did an interview with it was Zach Gallagher once upon a time who told me about a small film, Let Them Chirp a While, for instance, that I've been trying to find ever since. And I was looking it up last year. I hadn't realised that had been a beneficiary of your grants as well. That as much
Right.
as we talk about the stories at the top, I think always get told. I mean, Nosferatu, a wonderful success story, and I'm happy to keep banging the drum for it. But also, there's a whole bunch of people who only moved up one rung of the ladder, but at least got that opportunity to move up one rung of the ladder. And I just wonder about their stories as well, and about you talk about the films of Maiden, Voyage that you're proud of, but is there not some pride in just moving these people just a tiny bit along the board, no matter what came out?
There's some pride, but the lack of pride is a result of, I mean, without that frustration, the frustration I had when I was working with NYU
Yeah.
and helping these filmmakers along is what created Maiden Voyage. So
Yes, I remember. I
I
remember. Yeah,
can't separate the two. So when you see a film like D. Reese's Pariah,
I remember. Yeah,
which we essentially helped greenlight and helped D make, well, we weren't involved. So I stepped away as soon as D got
yeah,
the grant. We had this incredible ceremony. D thanked us. She was in tears for greenlighting her film. But I hopped on a plane from New York and went back to San Francisco, and a year later, I got a DVD in the mail. So the satisfying part of that is the D managed to take that and turn it into a successful career. There were other filmmakers we helped who didn't have that opportunity, and part of that, I believe, and I have to put the blame on myself, is because we weren't involved the entire way. So decisions have to be made along the way, particularly when you're shooting or when the film is in post-production or when the film does well at Sundance, and we have to make a decision because it's a life or death decision what distributor that film
I
goes
get
with.
that.
All of these things have to be. So I feel that I was, I helped find films that could get a grant, and that was it. So I was helpful for 5% of it,
Yeah,
And with Main Voyage, I'm able to be helpful for all of it. And sometimes the filmmakers don't go on to do great things, but they've made one great film,
yeah.
and maybe they'll make another one.
It's still incumbent on my side of the fence to bang that drum for patty cakes. I've got my requisite two mentions of it into this interview now, and I will continue to fight that fight. Um,
And I love that because it's a film that's very dear to my heart.
it's still a great, great, great film. I really, really, really loved it. I think when we were talking last, this was December 2024. You'd just done your 10-week cut of the Thursday Murder Club at that point, and then we're thrown into the midst of Nosferatu's incredible success. Can I ask what's changed since you delivered that cut? What have you gone through in the last 3-4 months on the film?
Um,
These stories don't
Not
get
well.
told
I
very
mean,
often.
what was great about um, the Thursday Murder Club was a very painless process because immediately, even when we showed the audience a cut that was 20 minutes longer, they responded to it in a big way. So the audience loved the film from the beginning.
Yeah,
So for me, it was a matter of then looking inside the film and sort of finding the things that needed to be cut because I always felt that each film dictates its own running time, and I felt the
yeah,
Thursday Murder Club was a film that could survive maybe a few minutes over 2 hours, and that's it. Even though the audiences were responding to cuts that were 2 hours and 25 minutes long. It was a process that was joyful because it was joyful. Part of it was joyful because it was, I was working on my director's cut of the film, which, Steven Spielberg supported throughout the entire making of the film. And I think one of the more touching and greatest, probably two of the greatest days on the production of Thursday Murder Club were when, I was able to show, Steven was telling me that when he as executive producing or overseeing some of these films, the directors, and I'm in shock. Some of the directors don't want his input. Some of the directors are like, "Please leave me alone. I'm in the editing room." And I it's just extraordinary to me. I'm thinking this is Steven Spielberg, one of the, if not the greatest living director working today. Why would you not want? He's got no ulterior motive except to make the film better. So I was 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks into my cut, and I invited Steven into the editing room. I said, I want to show you the first cut of the film, and I want to get your input. So Steven and I spent 2 days in the editing room. Him giving me his notes, and the
Love
two of
it.
us talking about film and talking about this film and working on it to make it better. It was joyful. It was absolutely amazing. And that, I think, the fact that I had Steven's support throughout the making of Thursday Murder Club, it was just absolutely amazing. So all of that was just part of me able to make the film better and better, you know.
One of my favorite stats about you, if I've got this right, just in terms of editing film, I think you shot more physical film on Mrs. Doubtfire than Coppola shot on Apocalypse Now. So,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I absolutely love that. Just in terms of painless editing, I could completely see where it was in your eyes at that point.
Yes.
And so, I mean, you've put it in front. You've put it in front of test audience. You've kind of seen where the film is now. How do you feel on it? I mean, again, I'm looking at it in your filmography. It's just like a fairly fast turnaround by the standards of some of the projects that you've done. How do you reflect just on the process of this? You sort of hinted at it there that it's one of the calmer films that you've done.
Yeah, it's calm in a sense, but it was also, it was the most fun I've had, certainly,
Oh, interesting.
since Potter, working on a film. Potter was totally joyous in terms of getting the opportunity to work with those actors. It was totally non-joyous in the pressure that we had on when making the first film. Not know, we had no idea we were making a successful film, and we thought if we failed, we'd fail miserably, and it would be the end of the series. So there was that pressure that didn't exist on this. On this film, I was in the hands of four incredibly talented actors, and I had the opportunity to work with actors who I loved and admired, who may not have been that famous on this side of the world.
Yeah,
I mean, people know Celia Imrie from
yeah.
some of the films that have been popular here, but people did not really know her name, and honestly think Celia almost steals the film to a certain extent.
It's
Um,
Pierce Brosnan in a rubber ring. That's the iconic image I'm
that's the
taking.
icon, Pierce Brosnan, and Pierce and I. This is our third film together, so we
Yes,
had a
quite.
bit of a shorthand working together, and you know, I think it's Helen Mirren who sort of set the tone on the set. I had no idea what it was going to be like to work with her. But again, the reason I compare it to Potter is because with Potter, I had Maggie Smith and Richard Harris and Alan Rickman. And basically, this is the next level. This is not the next generation,
I get where
but
you're going.
certainly you have these British actors who come to the set incredibly well prepared and make my job easy. And it's just a joy to watch them, to watch their interpretation of each of these scenes every time we work together. So having that, and then having the dream of working with someone like Celia, the dream of, ever since seeing Broadchurch for the first time, I've been wanting
Yes.
to work with David Tennant. And I was shocked when he said yes. I thought, it was a joy to work with someone like David Tennant. And then discovering people like Naomi Ackie and Billy Mays,
Yeah.
and even getting to work with Richard E. Grant, which was totally unexpected. And also it's just the cast is I mean, Jonathan Pryce. We can't
Yeah.
forget about Jonathan Pryce, who came in to do a small role in the film. So it was a dream for a director to work with all of these people.
Our time is up. It's always a joy to talk to you. I want to
Thanks
get you
so
to the
much.
UK and I want to put on a Maiden Voyage Film Festival. I want to
Thank
find
you,
three or
Simon. I'm
four of
up for
those.
that.
So there you have it. He's up for that. That was Chris Columbus, who just directed The Thirsty Murder Club, available on Netflix now. It brings to an end this special episode of Film Stories. Thanks for listening. Thank you for your time. Please do the like, subscribe thing. That stuff really helps independent podcasts like this. Likewise, if you really like the podcast, please do consider heading over to patreon.com/Simon Brew and popping some coins in the pot there. You can find more from me on Instagram, simon.brew, Blue Sky, Simon Brew. Film Stories is on Blue Sky, Simon Brew. Instagram, Film Stories Magazine UK. Great handle that, right? We're at youtube.com/Film Stories, facebook.com/Film Stories online. And then our online shop, store.filmstories.co.uk, is where you will find our print magazines for sale. We do print magazines. Madness. Working on new ones right at this moment as well, ish. And we've also got an assortment of unofficial merchandise, our UK exclusive Blu-rays of No Way Out and Bull Durham as well, all to be found there. And then our clickbait-free entertainment website, filmstories.co.uk. We don't use AI or anything either. It's just human beings writing about stuff. You never know, it might just work. That, though, is it for this time. Thank you so much for lending me your eardrums. Thank you for your time. I'll be back soon with another episode of Film Stories. Until then, the main thing is you all stay well. Take care. Bye-bye.